The Legendary Scrolls, a book by Zachary James Fraser, to soon be published. This is a preview of each book of the Legendary Scrolls. Passage from Book 1, titled, The Account of Arcane's Creation. Before time, there was only the Ether. Arcane always was, and Dula was always with him. Arcane created darkness, and he called it Oblivion. So there was the Ether, and there was Oblivion. Ether is infinite being, and Oblivion is infinite nothingness. Where Arcane is, there also is being. Arcane created two great masses, one on top, and one below. The one above was a cluster of white light, and the one below was a cluster of red light. Arcane spun them together, and he created a great divide between them, separating the white cluster from the red cluster. Thus a great expanse was made between the two masses. Arcane fashioned the two masses into worlds, one of light above, and one of fire below. Arcane called the world of light Amnia, and the world of fire he called Hyalvan. Thus Amnia and Hyalvan were finished. Arcane created the Empyrean seat, which sits above Amnia. There he created the 6 Espers and the 4 precursors. Arcane made Toniel from a speck of his light. At the same time, he made Kaifen from nothing. After that, he also made Argisax, Rechaeus, and the 6 Espers. These are the Espers which Arcane created: Angelus, Virga, Maya, Tenebris, Chaos, and Ravenera. Angelus, Virga, and Maya are Espers of light. Tenebris, Chaos, and Ravenera are Espers of darkness. End of preview for Book 1. Passage from Book 2, titled The Book of Primatus. Goa bore many sons and daughters. And he had a son named Zerafox, whom he favored above the others. Now Goa was a very rich man, and he had been mining minerals and precious ores from the mountains since his youth. And Goa divided his offspring off into different houses, one for every 7. Zerafox lived in the mansion with Rain, Urin, Rasa, Aaron, Mirva, and Santel. And he was the youngest of them. There was a day when Goa came to visit Zerafox, and he gave him 350 bags full of platinum, gold, silver, copper, bronze, emeralds, and diamonds. Now when Goa had blessed Zerafox with this large inheritance, Rain, the oldest sister, came to speak with Zerafox. And Rain said to Zerafox, "You are favored above us. Why? What have we done to turn away the face of our father from us? Yet you, who were born last, are blessed with countless platinum and gold because you have done nothing. You have not even tamed a dragon, or restrained a wyvern, or journeyed throughout the land of Grianara. Yet you have earned all these riches. Who do you think you are?" And Zerafox replied, saying, "I am the last born of the children of Goa, and I am nothing but a lowly man. Yet I have been blessed with this inheritance regardless of my works." And because the brothers and sisters of Zerafox became exceedingly envious of him, he chose to depart from his family's house. Zerafox left his family's house, and he journeyed northward from the land of Grianara, bringing all of his riches which his father gave him. When Zerafox reached the great plain, which is surrounded by the mountains, he claimed the land for himself. And he said in his heart, "This land shall be called Altira, because I will build the greatest city of all the earth on this plain." So Zerafox began to build the city, using his inheritance. And he went to nearby towns and villages, which were in the mountains, to find skilled builders and architects, and he hired them to aid in building his great city. He also built himself a great palace, which he placed in the center of the city, so that all on the outside could gaze upon its magnificence. When the city of Altira was finished being built, many people from all over the mountains of Grianara came to live in the city. Therefore Zerafox was the first king of Altira. The time it took to build the city was 520 years. It came to pass, when Zerafox's kingdom had grown large, then he gave his heart to Sophronia. So Zerafox took Sophronia as his wife, and she was the first queen of Altira. And to them a child was born, who was to be the first prince of Altira, and they named him Akena. After the birth of Akena, the flood of darkness took over the earth, and Zerafox and Sophronia were taken by it. Only Akena remained. End of preview for Book 2. Passage from Book 3, titled, The Workings of Sintha. When Atheon taught things concerning the soul, spirit, and body, he would also speak profoundly mysterious things concerning the spirit world. The spirit world, otherwise known as Phespira, is the realm where spiritual beings and creatures dwell. Phespira is, in a sense, adjacent to the natural realm in which we see, hear, smell, and taste. The fairies were given by Toniel the ability to peer into and wander into Phespira, just as the Biena can hear it. Not only does Phespira encompass all of the natural worlds, but also Amnia and Hyalvan as well. Amnia and Hyalvin are a mysterious mixture of both physical and spiritual matter. When teaching about Thespira, Atheon spoke of the different types of spiritual beings and creatures which inhabit it. Angelus, the Esper of light and justice, is the father of the angels. All the myriads of angels which inhabit Amnia and go to and fro across the spirit realm were born from Angelus. Angels are made of spiritual light. There are male and female angels, yet they do not reproduce, as they are spirits. While they are spirits, they also have the ability to manifest themselves in human form. The angels are not meant to do this regularly, but only when granted special permission by Toniel. Angels do not have ranks, but they answer to Angelus, as he is the chief of the angels. The angels resemble each other in appearance. Angels serve Toniel and aid those who would follow the light. While angels are born of Angelus, demons are born of chaos, the Esper of darkness. Demons are made of spiritual darkness, and their spiritual bodies are infused with the very fires of Hyalvin. Some demons may be male or female, while others may not be. Demons also have the ability to manifest in human form. However, since demons are twisted creatures, their incarnations never have a concrete figure or appearance. Unlike the angels, the demons have lower and higher ranks among them. And unlike the angels, demons vary greatly in shape and appearance. The demons live to tempt people to follow the darkness, and they would use a man's own emotions against him. Aside from angels and demons, who mostly occupy Amnia and Hyalvin, and who seldom roam about Thespira, there are many other spirits. There are spirits called Yus, which are not sentient beings like angels and demons, but are rather akin to animals of the physical realm. An EU is much like a wild coyote or wingless drake in appearance, yet made entirely of fiery red and orange energy. Nightmares are another type of spirit that is not fully sentient. A nightmare is much like an EU in appearance, but made of black and blue energy. Nightmares have the ability to enter the dreams of those sleeping in the physical realm, and this is what keeps them alive. Nightmares feast on the fears of many. The last type of spirit that Atheon would speak of are called Vorsen. Vorsen, Atheon would say, are the most mysterious spirits out of them all. Not even Atheon knew much concerning them, other than the occasional sightings of them slipping in and out of the physical and spiritual realms. End of preview for Book 3. Passage from Book 4, titled, The Account of Infernos. Now the many peoples of the worlds had advanced fairly far in their technology, and the four precursors were working behind the scenes. While the people who lived on Rift Plains were busy with their lives, the precursors were meeting together in Rechaeus Castle, which is in the Soul World. There they discussed and conversed about the future of Imperia and what they were to do with the time. They had been called together by Kaifen for the meeting. Then Kaifen spoke of something mysterious, which he had found hidden in Imperia by Arcane. And after he said these things, the others asked Kaifen to show them this object. Kaifen brought them out of Animorba and led them to an unknown place, which was hidden in Thespira. There Kaifen showed them a mysterious structure. The precursors all gathered around the structure, and they began to test it. Toniel came to the structure with Gaia, and he dropped some inside of it. Nothing happened. Then Kaifen said, "If you have placed Gaia into it, then let us also mix Gaia with chaos. It would be a sight to behold." And they listened to him, not sensing his cunning scheme. So they dropped a hint of chaos into it as well. Within the structure began a boiling and mixing of elements and energy. For this, they called it the Cauldron. And after the Gaia and chaos had mixed, there was a great explosion. From the cauldron arose a great flame, and the flame became a living being. Because there was Gaia, there was life. Because there was chaos, there was distortion. This created a living being of destruction. The precursors saw the beast of fire, that it was powerful, and they called it Infernos. And because of its immense power and might, they locked it up and bound it in the cauldron so that it could not cause destruction. End of preview for Book 4. Passage from Book 5, titled, The Book of Netzer. King Ankazar sent his messengers to Netzer. As the messengers were walking in the streets of Netzer, they were ambushed by the king's archers, who hid behind the bells on the top of a bell tower. To avoid causing concern in the hearts of his citizens, King Nethash himself went down to the city to inspect the bodies of the messengers. Under the robes of one of the men was the scroll with the seal of the king of Ultira, and blood was splattered across it. "Burn their bodies in the pit, and clean this scroll. I shall read it in the castle after I have bathed myself," ordered Nethash to his guards. So the soldiers burned the bodies of the messengers, and they brought the scroll to King Nethash's throne. Nethash read the letter in the scroll, then said to his guards, "I demand General Kilamar's presence at once." So King Nethash's guards went to get the general of the Netzer army. "General Kilamar, known as the strongest man in the kingdom of Netzer, was given full authority over the Netzer army, because Nethash knew Kilimar was more skilled in leading an army than himself. General Kilimar arrived in the king's throne room, and kneeled before him. "Raise your head, General. I have received word from the Eltiran army that they have declared war on us. This is your time to show off the strength of your men. Go, make war." General Kilimar raised his head, stood on his feet, and left the castle. Receiving word that his messengers were killed, King Ankazar sent spies to Enox. The spies snuck into the Netzer army military outpost, where their soldiers were training, and they reported to Ankazar the number of their troops. The number they reported to King Ankazar was about 29,000. Then King Ankazar said, "Let us make one more attempt to make them our allies, for their army is large." So the king began to draft a treaty. During this time of the Great War, there was a large airship built which could sail through the currents of the space of Orista. This ship was called the Solar Phantom, and it was used for traversing Orista to reach different rift planes. King Ankazar bought the ship for a temporary time, to meet with King Nethash in it, because Ankazar knew he would be ambushed if he visited Netzer. Each of them brought their army on the ship, and the two armies faced each other while the kings sat down. They held the meeting in the center of the ship, where there was a large table. Extending the treaty to Nethash, Ankazar said, "King Nethash of Netzer, please accept my offer. I will not start this war if you sign this treaty, but I will instead give you and your kingdom many riches. I would rather our nations not endure the calamities of war." And King Nethash responded, "I do not need your riches, for my kingdom rests above the greatest reservoir of precious stones and crystals on Enox. Keep your platinum and your gold and silver. Nevertheless, I accept your offer. May there be peace between our kingdoms, and I may even allow diplomatic relations." While King Nethash was signing the treaty, a group of assassins in his army climbed to the deck of the ship, and they readied their crossbows and knives. Where the kings were sitting, each of them had their army behind their backs, and their ions were positioned in the front lines. "I hope our countries get along well," Nethash said, as he finished signing the treaty. King Ankazar took the paper, and stamped his seal on the scroll, saying, "Thank you for your cooperation, King Nethash." Both of them stood on their feet, their armies still facing each other. As King Ankazar began walking to the rift gate on his side of the room, an arrow shot down, and one of the soldiers in his army fell. Immediately King Nethash was gone, and had left through the rift gate to his castle. And King Ankazar shouted to his army, "Then this is war. Do not hold back, wipe out every last one of them." End of preview for Book 5. Passage from Book 6, titled The Fall of Calvus. The funeral was a wretched affair. Everyone was wearing black sackcloth, and the stained-glass windows of the temple seemed colorless. My father was dead, but all of the things he did for our kingdom will never be forgotten. As I sat there, awaiting the dreadful sound of the instruments, I began to reminisce on all the things I did alongside him in the palace. I remembered the day when I was out in the palace garden with my father, and he brought me to see his hidden scrolls. He showed me all of his writings, which recorded the events of the Battle of Netzer. As I recollected these things, my mother kneeled before the casket, and her tears became a river. The casket was decorated with gold jewels, and it had black engravings. My father's crown rested upon his hands, which were holding his chest. There was not 1 ounce of joy in the temple, only dark clouds that hovered over our heads. I began to remember all the legends my mother had told me, concerning my father's endeavors. The story where he led the Eltiran army in battle against the Netzer kingdom, and the entire city of Netzer was burned to the ground. Then, when the smoke cleared, he ordered all of his ions to clean up the rubble. Then he claimed that land for our kingdom, and we gained a second city after he rebuilt it. My mother Holly would tell me stories of my father's youth as well, and all the times he would journey to the other lands, and would even cross the sea without saying goodbye. I remember when I was younger, and my father would allow me to sit on his throne, and he would tell me that I would be king one day. Then he would say, "Always remember, my child, though you will be king, you must never let your heart be lifted up. For a proud heart will always fall, and the people will suffer because of your haughtiness." I sat there, and I remembered all the good things my father did for the kingdom of Altira. He won almost every battle. Even though he was highly esteemed to be a good king, he never let his heart grow proud, and he never saw others as lower than himself. He even saw some of the peasants as higher than himself, for he said, "They may have nothing according to material standards, but their hearts are far richer than mine. Now I am to be the next king of Altira, and the people will look up to me. I must follow my father's footsteps in leading this kingdom. However, now that he's gone, I have no man to look up to. I can only base my future actions on what my father might have done. Those memories kept playing over in my head as I sat there, the room still dead silent. Then the musicians came out, each of them holding flutes and lyres. As they began to play a slow melody, all the memories came back, and they played a gloomy dirge. And I began to go over it all, again and again. End of preview for Book 6. Passage from Book 7, titled The Fall of Castor. Upon arriving on the rift plain of Kyliska, I found myself standing before a strange mountain. But this landmass was not sculpted in a natural manner, at least not a seemingly natural manner. And strange plants and thorny trees were growing from its sides. Under the opening of the curved mountain was a great entrance, which was the entrance to the road which led to the city of the Lake of Lacriteria. When I approached the gate of the entrance, a fairy came from behind a booth decorated with colorful lights. The fairy had red eyes, silver hair, a large red ribbon in her hair, as well as blue wings which were outlined with a red hue. She said to me, "Hume, I perceive you to be a king. Is this not so?" And I replied, "Indeed I am. But how did you know?" Then she said, "We fairy folk know many things. We are known for our wisdom, which was given to us as a gift by the precursor Toniel himself." Then I said, "And it seems he has gifted you with great humility as well. Tell me, what is your name?" She replied, "I am Wendell, keeper of the city of Lacriteria. And what business does a Hume king have in our humble city?" Then I explained, "I have come in search of a queen. From the mouth of my own servant I have heard that this city guards the Fairy of the Lake. I have come to speak with her." After Wendell heard my intent in visiting the city, she went back behind her hut by the mountainside. When she came out again, she said, "Stay at our inn for the night, and you may enter the lake tomorrow morning. I will have one of our watchers take you on a ferry to where she slumbers." After that, she sent me another fairy from the hut to guide me down into the city. As I entered the city itself, I began to feel very small, as though I weren't a king. There were fairies standing on the tops of trees and buildings, and fireflies filled the air like a warm fog. Once the fairy had taken me to the inn, she said to the fairy behind the counter, "This Hume is a king on Arden, the ruler of the kingdom of Altira. Therefore Wendell has decided to pay for his stay with her own silver." And she placed silver coins in her hand. The other fairy replied, "Thank you. The room upstairs in the back is open. Enjoy your stay." As I slept that night in the inn, I began to suspect that the fairies throughout the city who stared at me before knew what I was there for. I barely slept that night, with paranoid thoughts swimming in my mind, though the atmosphere of the city was like a warm blanket. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of flutes playing outside the window. And the fireflies which were golden at night were purple in the morning. I left the inn and returned to Wendell's hut at the entrance of the city. But when I got there, she was not in the booth. So I said to those in the hut, "Where has Wendell gone?" And they replied, "She left about 2 hours ago, saying that she would be waiting for your arrival at the lakeside house." So I turned around and went back into the city, and I asked fairies for directions to the lakeside house. When I arrived at the lake, I saw Wendell standing next to another fairy with silver hair and red eyes. And she said, "This is my twin sister, Noelle. I have spoken with her, and she has agreed to take you out to the center of the lake." Then Noelle said, "Climb aboard the ferry at the dock." After climbing aboard and leaving the dock, Noelle handed me a ruby jewel, saying, "This token will summon her, Mistress Lacriteria, from under the lake. Take heed that you have a pure heart before speaking to her." End of preview for Book 7. Passage from Book 8, titled, The Rise of Pollux. I am a man by the name of Thires, a scribe and historian. The 29th king of Altira recorded the beginning of his reign in his own journal, just as many other kings of Altira had done in the past. I've studied his journal entries and the historical records of his reign, and by the prompting of Toniel's spirit, I have decided to write about them in this scroll. King Pollux reigned from 4591 to 4869 years after creation. In the year 4591, the same year that King Castor lost his sanity and died, Pollux took the throne of Altira. His name had already begun to spread in popularity throughout the kingdom, and many viewed him with great respect. End of preview for Book 8. This book has less material written for it at the time of the making of this video. Passage from Book 9, titled, Letters from Flora.
Dear Faith, you are one of the only people who can seem to understand me. I frequently find myself wishing that I could be by your side again, but I'm afraid my parents would not allow me to travel so far again. Truly, I know they care for me. But sometimes I feel as though they want to shelter me from the real world that's out there. I am yet grateful to them for allowing me to have made my tour around the continent these past several months. I am glad I made the trip, so that I eventually saw you face to face. In regards to your last letter, I am still waiting. No matter, I will come to see you again, so that I may give you my final answer. Although I'm sure you can tell by the way in which I am writing this, what the answer will be. Even so, I wish to say it to you in person, rather than you reading it on a scroll of paper. As I am writing this, the fireflies are lighting up the marsh outside my window. Their lights reveal the beautiful lush green pigments of the plants under the purple moonlight. It is nights like these that make me wish the sun would never rise. I thought I'd mention this, so as to make you feel as though you were with me. You told me when I last saw you that you were planning to join the Elvish army. I know your city in Ahana is being used by Queen Zela in the east. So I implore you not to get ahead of yourself, or to be too vigilant in these threatening times. They may turn you in as a spy, or they may change sides and join the armies of Sedima. If that were to happen, then we would be forced to be enemies. Please do not let that happen, Farith. I beg of you, do not give up on your relationships with others for the sake of gaining military power. Otherwise you'll become just like all these nations of people who have had their hearts overruled by the beast. And besides all this, are we not elves? Should not the elves be an example for the humans? Far be it from any elf to dishonor themselves as the humans do. The hearts of humans are easily persuaded to battle, so we must not be the same. As for me, I am doing well. I have been staying at my parents' house in the marshlands of Savor since I returned from my journey. I've been reading over books from our time together in the academy back in Ahana. From them I have learned many things about Arclight, and I have even discovered that I'm an Ion throughout my journey. When I had made it back home to my parents, I told them this. They did not believe me, but I proved I was an Ion to them when I generated a ball of water above my bomb.
End of preview for Book 9. Passage from Book 10, titled, Records of Miranda. Now when Miranda was 14 years old, she was brought before her tribe to be set apart as a tent keeper. And the chief of the village said, Miranda, today you are to be set apart as one of the tent keepers of the village. Now it was a custom in the tribe for the women to remain in the tents to clean them and to cook while the men were off hunting or mining. But Miranda, being full of courage, said unto the chief, No. I will not. I seek a life of greatness, not one of comfort and boredom. Let me be a huntress, and I shall be greater than even the best of these. And when she had said this, she pointed to all of the hunters behind her. And the chief dropped his staff, saying, Never have I heard such sharp words from you. Then he motioned with his hands to his bodyguards, saying, Take her to her family's tent. She will not be allowed to leave her tent for the next 2 months. And she may only receive 1 meal a day from the hunters. But when the bodyguards took a hold of her wrists, she broke free, and she released a wave of blaze arclight, and the blast sent the men flying. Now there was an uproar in the village, and some of the tents were set ablaze by Miranda's arclight. And the chief shouted, Catch her. The child has been an Ion this whole time. She is no longer one of us. But Miranda had escaped the village, and she sprinted through the trees till she was very far from the camp. Eventually Miranda reached another village, where there were solid buildings rather than tents. And she spent that night in the inn of the village. The next day, Miranda escaped that village as well, and she journeyed across the land of Palma until she reached the edge of the island. There she entered another town. And there in that town was a very skilled blacksmith by the name of Ruxer. Miranda entered his shop, and she asked, Sir, may I purchase a sword and shield from you? And Ruxer replied, To a young girl like you? Have you any money? But Miranda said, If you give me a sword and shield, I shall pay you twice the price of the equipment. After considering her offer for a moment, he said, Very well then. Pick one short sword and shield. And Miranda picked out the longest of the short swords, one which had a ruby hilt, as well as a shield made of ruby stone. From there, Miranda left the blacksmith's shop in the town to hunt for game to trade for money. Now Miranda was out hunting a herd of rhine arrows, and there were a group of mercenaries who were stalking her. When Miranda had turned to see them hiding among the trees, she assumed them to be a group of bandits. Therefore she turned to aim her blade at them instead of the rhine arrows. And when she had pointed her blade toward them, the mercenaries jumped out from the trees to capture her. Because they were great in number, they overpowered her, and she cut the knees of 4 of the men. But 3 others used arclight to shock her, and they paralyzed her. They wrapped a black cloth around her head, and they picked her up by her legs to carry her. When the mercenaries had brought her to their employer's house, they threw her in a cage underground. And one of them said to their employer, "We have found an Ion, a young girl, who was wandering the wilderness. We believe she will be of great value." Their employer replied, "Let me see this girl. I will not give a single coin until I see what strength she has." So the man went down to see Miranda, and he saw that she was not afraid. When he saw that there was no fear in her eyes, he said to her, "What is your name, little girl? If you don't answer, I'll have you sold to my highest bidder in town." But she said nothing. The man then grew angry, and he said, "You will soon learn to respect me, even if I have to engrave it into you with pain." After he said this, he called down the mercenaries. And he said to them, "She is defective. I will pay you handsomely if she is half dead by morning." The employer retired to sit in his room, and the mercenaries entered the cell with torture weapons, and they beat Miranda blue for hours. The chains on her wrists sapped her arclight energy, so that she could not fight back. After the sun began to rise, the men returned upstairs, leaving Miranda shaking on the floor. And when their employer had finished eating, he came down to check on her condition, to see if she was yet near to death. Another day passed, and now the chains on Miranda's wrists had drained their fill of her arclight. Therefore she was able to refill the arclight in her soul with great haste. With that, Miranda broke free from the chains binding her to the wall of the cell, and she shot a ball of flames through the latch at the top of the stairs. Now the owner of the house was panicked, and he called the mercenaries from outside to give his money back. But Miranda snuck past them, and she retrieved her sword and shield from the mercenaries' caravan. As the mercenaries were arguing with their employer, Miranda swung her blade across their backs, and the owner ran to escape to his room. As the owner grabbed his sword, Miranda swung her blade again from afar, discharging a wave of fire into the air. The wave of blaze arclight sliced through the man's torso, and the man died. So Miranda escaped from that house, and she found herself in Palma's west side bay town. Miranda wandered the air docks of the bay, waiting for an airship to stop by. Eventually a large commercial airship stopped in the air docks, and Miranda saw the passengers coming off from afar. She hurried over to the booth at the air dock, and she paid the toll for a place on the ship for the next trip. The ship was set to fly into the province of Jarkson, the floating continent to the west of the province of Ilxias. Miranda thought to herself, "Perhaps I shall find a city in Jarkson that will accept me as one of their own, that I may join a guild and become a strong warrior." End of preview for Book 10. Passage from Book 11, titled, Legends of Orion. Kaifen entered the city of Latia, and walked down the streets in disguise. No one in the streets could tell who he was, for he wore a pitch-black cloak and hood to hide his divine presence. However, as he passed by the entrance of a local tavern, a silver-haired woman pulled on his cloak from the floor. And the woman said to him, "My lord, save me from this city. I have been held captive as a slave for 2 months, and I have been driven to the edge of madness. Please, my lord. For I know you are a precursor." Hearing the woman's plea, and seeing that she could recognize him, he felt pity on her. "Who am I, that I should feel pity for a human?" he said. Kaifen knelt down and helped the woman up to her feet, saying, "Can you not stand on your feet?" "I cannot, my lord. The man who owns this tavern had made me drink till I fainted. He had placed a sedative inside the glass," the woman replied. Then Kaifen said, "Since you have seen me as I am, I shall grant you deliverance from this bondage. Woman, tell me your name." And the woman replied, "Elisa, my lord." Then she said, "As for you, lord, you are Kaifen, the precursor of oblivion." And Kaifen was impressed, and his eyes were given insight to her soul. "You cannot be a normal woman, for you have captured my eye." Then Elisa replied, "It could not be so. For you are a precursor, and I, a mere human." Now Kaifen saw her humility and reverence of spirit, so he chose to love her personally. And Elisa said, "Please, allow me to serve you, my lord. I will prepare a pure drink for you are indeed a precursor." But Kaifen said, "Bring your master to me, the one who took you to be his slave. I shall equalize his mind with the reality of his being." And Elisa had perfect faith in him, so she obeyed him immediately. Now Elisa's master did not listen to her. Thus Kaifen himself went into the tavern, and he confronted the man behind the bar. "Are you the one who has dared to notice my servant? She belongs to me, and I paid for her," the man said. Taking the master's elbow, Kaifen tore his arm off the socket, leaving the man to scream in agony. The ruler of oblivion is not to be confronted by one born of man, Kai-Fen said. Now after these things happened, Kai-Fen took with him the slave woman Elisa, and set her free by granting her his constant presence. And Elisa worshipped him day and night, as she fell in love with him. And Kai-Fen said to himself, "Lo, I have fallen in love with a woman." As Kai-Fen and Elisa were staying in a house on the outskirts of the city, Toniel came to talk with him. When Toniel appeared, stepping out from a bright light, Elisa fainted, and Kai-Fen rested her head on the couch. Then Toniel said, "Kai-Fen, what are you doing here?" And Kai-Fen replied, "This woman was bought by a man, and now she is traumatized from the evil works of this city. I suggest we destroy the city. Are you calling out evil?" Toniel replied. Kai-Fen responded, "It is because of this woman, for I have fallen in love." So Toniel and Kai-Fen agreed with each other that the city of Latakia would be judged, because it was filled with murderers and slave owners. Elisa awoke from her slumber. And Kai-Fen said to her, "Come with me." She followed him without question. So Kai-Fen and Elisa escaped the city. Once they reached the outside of Latakia, Kai-Fen looked up to the sky, and lifted his left hand, saying, "Rain down on this city." About 5 seconds passed, and the clouds above the city began to swirl. Flames descended from the thick dark clouds, and the fire enveloped the entire city, blocking out the horizon. And above the cloud of fire there were the eyes of Infernos. So the great city of Latakia was scorched to ashes that night. End of preview for Book 11. Passage from Book 12, titled, The Book of Gis. Gis, a poet from the Rift Plain Pyrrha during the Great War. To those with a broken heart, and whose grief will not turn from them. This is a compilation of his poems. Greetings, to those whose hearts are broken, and who have survived to see the end of the Great War. I write these for you. Some have lost their homes, and some have lost their loved ones. Do not think I have no experience in such matters, as I have a plethora of sorrows to share with you. I will bear my heart on my sleeve, and I will expose the dark clouds of my soul. The war was coming to its end at the time of my youth. That was when the war was at its peak. The cities around my town were burned down, and even my own family was taken from me. My father, who was at first a great man who followed the light, fell to the darkness, and he was killed in combat. My mother worked alongside Miranda, and she lost her life as well, while she was healing the injured during battle. With my brothers and sisters also gone, I was left alone to wallow in misery. But then I found her, the love of my life. She was like an angel, so beautiful and loving. She showed love to all, save one. I fell in love with her, but she never loved me. We shared the days of our youth together, but she only saw me as another man. Oh Atha, I love you, but why don't you love me? I would give anything to have you back even for one day. She was taken over by a fatal illness. Her life was taken from her, and she was taken from me. My heart fell to pieces, and I had not the strength nor the wisdom to find them all, or to put them back together. And the love of my life, who never loved me in return, in her last dying breath she said, just when I had begun to feel the same way. Those words will forever haunt me. Love is a withering rose, and when it dies, only the thorns remain. Its beauty and pleasing aroma pulls you towards it, and when you reach out to grab it, it shrinks away, and someone else grabs it. Then those who possess it enjoy its beauty and aroma, until it withers away and pierces their flesh with thorns. Then they will say, "See to it that you never find love, for it will be a thorn in your flesh." Then why should I worry or be sorrowful? If love is painful, then I should be glad I have never received it. Love entices the heart, then destroys it. Unrequited love forsakes the heart, then leaves it in its own misery, so that the heart is devoured by the darkness. Therefore see to it that no one ever falls in love, so that they may not experience unrequited love. Unrequited love is the root of my fear. So tightly anchored in the ground it is, that no one can pull it out with strength alone. From this fear arises hatred and wrath. For unless one controls their heart and conforms it to the light, all will fall to the darkness if they are overcome by fear. Unrequited love was the root of my fear, and I never ceased in laboring to uproot it. But everything was meaningless. Nothing was ever achieved in that labor, and I fell into a depression. Truly this life is despair. The fruits of my labor are in vain, and I am cursed to walk alone all the days of my life. I lie awake till midnight, and my heart slows down. Every thought and emotion from the abyss of my heart rises up, and I cannot find rest. I seek death, yet I fear it. I am a coward above all cowards, and am one to be pitied most, for I have no meaning in this world. If I were born an Ion, surely I would have better fortune. Nevertheless, fortune is a mere construct, and it cannot be measured. I must constantly fight against the darkness growing inside my heart. If I fail to suppress it even for a day, then it will take over, and I will have fallen into the darkness fully. For the darkness makes its bed in the hearts of both depraved and despairing men alike. One may seek the darkness and be filled with it, while another may seek the light, yet be filled with the darkness because of their broken heart. So I warn those with broken hearts, do not fall to the darkness, like so many do because of the temptation. When the urge to let go of the light because of your suffering grows stronger, then fight against it with all your might. And if you cannot find the strength to carry on, allow the darkness to fill your soul, and you will suffer the wrath of Wyvern. End of preview for Book 12. Passage from the 13th and final book of the Legendary Scrolls, titled, The Book of Baalil. I, Baalil, was tending to my house in the land of Sedima, when suddenly a knock came to my front door. When I opened the door, soldiers sent by the emperor seized me by the arms. I knew why they were there, for my failure to pay the monthly taxes to Emperor Shavit. Even though I did not resist them, they still insisted on dragging me across the sand, as if I were struggling against them. The guards brought me before the throne of Shavit, and dragging me by my shirt they tossed me to the ground. Emperor Shavit said, "Baalil, do you know why we've summoned you to our throne?" And I said, "Yes." Then he replied, "We have not received one coin from you these past 11 months. Are you prepared to face the consequences?" But I held my tongue. Then Shavit gestured with his hand to the guards standing behind me, and they took me again by my shoulders. I knew I was going to be taken to the dungeon. Now they had taken me to the dungeons which are under Shavit's palace. And being locked in a cell, waiting for my execution, I reached in my pocket for my prayer medallion. I grasped the medallion close to my chest, and began praying fervently for my life to be spared. The medallion had an image of the precursor Toniel engraved on it. So I prayed to Toniel, crying out in tears, saying, "King of Emnia, hear my cry. Deliver me from this cell of death. I swear to follow the light all the days of my life if you deliver me from this doom." While I was praying, I heard the roar of the sand wyvern echoing from the cave of the dungeon. The guards eventually came to take me into the cavern where they held the sand wyvern. The sand wyvern breathes more flames than any of the other species of wyverns in the land of Sedima. The custom of the city was this: anyone who is cast into the dungeon will be executed by the flames of the breath of the sand wyvern. And this was my fate. When I was cast into the cavern, there slept the sand wyvern in the center, having its neck chained to the steel wall behind it. Surrounding the top of the cavern was a ledge, where there stood armed archers, ready to shoot me if the wyvern did not kill me. The gate was locked behind me, and the wyvern opened its eyes and stood up because of the sound of the gate closing. As the wyvern spread out its wings and turned its glare toward me, my body became weak because of the terror. I buried my face in the sand and put my hands on my head, for the fear overcame me. Looking up, I could see the flames brewing up in the belly of the wyvern, like a glowing lamp. Then a great voice came to me from Emnia, saying, "You promised to follow the light all the days of your life. Therefore I will deliver you from death if you swear once more. For if you fail to follow the light, you shall die on the spot." And I said, "I swear." At that exact moment, the wyvern choked on its own flames, and it dropped dead in the sand. And as the archers above readied their bows, being very confused, a bright light appeared above the dead wyvern, blinding the guards. And all of the guards and archers in the chamber died. Then within the light I could see a figure of a man in a white cloak, and the figure had wings. And the voice spoke again, "This is my servant Angelus. Follow him." Then I stood on my feet and went into the light, and the Esper wrapped its wings around me. I appeared before the Empyrean seat. And behold, I saw with my own eyes the Espers of light in their full forms, Angelus, Virga, and Maya. I fell upon my face. Then Angelus spoke, saying, "Follow me." And I was taken to the sanctuarium in Emnia. Behold, the great throne was before me, and sitting on it was Toniel. All around me was a mist of great lights, and the floor beneath my feet was like quartz embellished with many precious stones. Pillars stood on either side of the corridor, connecting to bright clouds that moved back and forth above the hall. Flashes of lightning and thunder shot out from the throne, and the light thereof allowed me to see the figure of Toniel. The throne was lifted up on a bright cloud, from which the flashes of lightning came from. I fell face down on the floor. And Toniel said, "Baalil, raise your head." I could only raise my head to look at him because he had granted it to me. Behold, he had long white hair and silver eyes. He also wore a long silver cloak, which reflected the light of the hall. Toniel said unto me, "You have sworn to me that you will follow the light all the days of your life. Now I shall reveal to you many things about Imperia, and you will see things that no man can describe. I have chosen to show you these things so that you may write them down, and they will be known by those who believe what you've written. I send my esper, Angelus, to lead you." After he said this, Angelus appeared before me. The esper's face was hidden behind light, which was covered by the hood of his golden cloak. And his wings unfolded from behind him, and he grabbed my wrist. Then Angelus lifted me up off the floor, and I soared across the hallway to the entrance. When I looked back, I could not fathom the sight of the place. Even now I struggle to find the words that could describe what I saw. The sanctuarium was glorious to behold. It was radiating with marvelous light and perfect beauty and splendor. Angelus took me below the sanctuarium, where there was a great sea of mist and light. The mist began to swirl where Angelus was taking me. When we passed through the mist, a light enveloped me, and I was now soaring in the heavens of Ophisa. There I saw the earth, that is, Arden. Angelus took me above the clouds, and he showed me all the lands. I descended below the clouds above the land of Emek. I could see the entire basin of the land, and the great waterfall which surrounds the land, closing it off from the rest of the other lands. And I could see many Biana cities, and parts of them were hidden within the tall trees. After this, Angelus took me southward, and I could see the marshlands encompassing the great river of Savor as we passed through the clouds. Now we were above the land of even Hera. Endless grasslands spanned into the horizon, and I could see the great Ahana tree standing in the distance. Angelus took me to the Ahana tree, that great city of the elves. From the roots to the branches the tree was decorated with specks of light, which were the lights of many homes and marketplaces. After we had circled around the tree of Ahana, Angelus took me northward across the sea. To the right in the distance I could see the island of Sephoa, and the ruins of the city which was destroyed by Infernos. The following passages from the end of the book. "Then I saw a beautiful bride, pure and holy. And she was brought up in a crystal of light from a world of another kind. And Toniel said to me, 'This bride shall be my queen, and followers of the light shall bow to her as they do before me. I shall share my glory with her, for she shall be called my wife and the queen of Amnia. Her place shall be in the sanctuarium with me. Her heart and soul, and even her spirit, shall arise from the spirit of the dawn star, so that it may be shown that the dawn star is one in the same spirit as I.' And after this, Toniel brought my head back out of the pool of mist. And he said unto me, 'Now I shall show you an even greater vision, one any follower of the light could only dream to see.' And he placed my head back into the mist of light. Behold, I saw with my own 2 eyes the prophecy's fulfillment, the dawn star. There was a man robed in perfect light, and before him was the darkness made manifest. And by his marvelous light did he overcome the darkness. And so from those days after there will be no more evil, and the darkness shall lose its grip on the heart of man. For this reason is the man called the dawn star, for in his wake a new day shall begin for man. At last there will be balance in the worlds. But let this mystery be revealed to the reader, the dawn star will be the soul of 2, yet he shall be as one. Let the reader from ages ahead understand." End of preview for Book 13. Be on the lookout for when the book is finally published.